My name is Coco, and at 67 years old, I never imagined I would be burying my only son, Jackson. When he died unexpectedly, he left me a secret inheritance. His wife knew nothing about a beautiful house, 2 cars, and a bank account, all in my name. I chose not to tell my daughter-in-law Amanda about any of it. Something about her behavior at the funeral just felt wrong. That decision turned out to be the smartest choice I ever made, because what she tried to do a week later left me completely shattered. If you are watching this video, please take a moment to like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you are watching from today. My story might just save someone you love from making a terrible mistake. Jackson was always my pride and joy, the light of my life since the moment I first held him in my arms. We had a special bond closer than most mothers and sons, partly because we only had each other for so long. My husband Robert died in a construction accident when Jackson was just 5 years old. The workers' compensation barely covered the funeral expenses, leaving us nearly penniless. Those early years were incredibly difficult. I worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs just to keep a roof over our heads and food on the table. Our apartment was tiny, a 1-bedroom place where I gave Jackson the bedroom while I slept on a pull-out couch in the living room. Despite our financial struggles, I made sure Jackson never felt poor. We might not have had much, but we had love in abundance. Jackson was such a responsible child, wise beyond his years. By the time he was 12, he insisted on getting a paper route to help with expenses. I initially refused, wanting him to focus on school and just being a kid, but his determination won me over. Every morning he would wake up at 5, deliver papers before school, then come home and do his homework without me ever having to remind him. His academic achievements made my heart swell with pride. Despite our circumstances, Jackson graduated high school as valedictorian with a full scholarship to Northwestern University. I still remember sitting in that audience, tears streaming down my face as he thanked me in his speech for all the sacrifices I had made. That moment alone made every double shift, every missed opportunity, every struggle completely worth it. At college, Jackson majored in finance, determined to create a stable future where money troubles would never plague us again. He worked part-time throughout his university years, sending me small amounts whenever he could. I tried to refuse, telling him to keep it for himself, but he always insisted, saying, "Take it, Mom. One day I will make sure you never have to worry about money again." After graduation, his career took off quickly. He had a natural talent for financial planning and investment strategies. By 30, he had become one of the youngest senior financial advisors at a prestigious firm in Chicago. He bought me my first new car, paid off my credit card debt, and insisted I reduce my working hours. "Your days of struggling are over, Mom," he would tell me with that bright smile of his. It was at a charity gala 6 years ago that Jackson met Amanda. He called me that very night, excitement bubbling in his voice. "Mom, I met someone special tonight. I think she might be the one." Jackson had dated other women before, but none had ever prompted such immediate enthusiasm. When I first met Amanda at a dinner Jackson arranged, I could see why he was smitten. She was undeniably beautiful, with perfect blonde hair, striking blue eyes, and an elegant fashion sense that made her look like she belonged on a magazine cover. Her charm was apparent as she asked me questions about Jackson as a child, seeming genuinely interested in our story of struggle and success. I remember how she touched Jackson's arm constantly throughout that dinner, laughed at all his jokes, and looked at him with what I thought was adoration. She had a background in art history and worked at a gallery downtown. The way she spoke about art was passionate and knowledgeable, and I appreciated that she had her own career and interests. Their relationship progressed at lightning speed. Within 3 months, they were living together, and by 6 months, Jackson proposed. The wedding was lavish, an elegant affair at an exclusive venue overlooking Lake Michigan. Amanda had exquisite taste, but I noticed how she always gravitated toward the most expensive options during the planning process. Jackson brushed aside my gentle questions about the cost, insisting that he wanted to give her the wedding of her dreams. Looking back, there were subtle warning signs I chose to ignore. The way Amanda casually mentioned the price of everything she owned, how she seemed disappointed with gifts unless they came in small boxes from expensive jewelry stores. The comments about their friends, homes, and cars, always comparing, always wanting more. But Jackson seemed happy, and that was all that mattered to me. About 2 years into the marriage, Jackson began stopping by my apartment more frequently, often alone. During those visits, I sensed something was troubling him. When I asked if everything was okay with Amanda, he'd give a tight smile and say, "Marriage has its ups and downs, Mom. We're figuring things out." I never pushed, believing they would work through whatever issues they were having. During one such visit, about 8 months before the accident, Jackson brought up his financial planning. We were sitting on my small balcony, enjoying the summer evening, when he said, "Mom, I want you to know that I have arranged things so you'll always be taken care of no matter what happens." I laughed it off, telling him he was being morbid and that he had decades ahead of him. But he persisted, unusually serious. "Life is unpredictable, Mom. You taught me that. Promise me you'll accept what I have arranged for you if anything ever happens to me." His intensity worried me, but I promised, never imagining I'd have to honor that promise so soon. The last time we were all together as a family was at Thanksgiving, just 3 weeks before the accident. Jackson had insisted on hosting at their beautiful suburban home. Amanda seemed distracted that day, constantly checking her phone and disappearing for what she claimed were work calls. Jackson covered for her absenteeism, keeping the conversation flowing and making sure everyone was comfortable and well fed. As I was leaving, he hugged me tighter than usual and whispered, "I love you, Mom. More than you know." Those were the last words my son ever said to me. The phone call came on a Tuesday evening in early December. I had just finished dinner and was settling in with a book when my phone rang. The moment I heard the official tone of the hospital representative asking if I was Jackson's mother, my world began to crumble. They explained there had been a car accident on the icy highway. Jackson had lost control of his vehicle and crashed into a concrete barrier. By the time emergency services arrived, it was too late. I don't remember driving to the hospital. The next clear memory I have is standing in a sterile room looking down at my beautiful boy's face. He looked peaceful, almost as if he were sleeping, except for a small cut above his eyebrow. I reached out to smooth his hair the way I had done since he was a little boy. My mind kept rejecting the reality before me. This couldn't be happening. Not to Jackson. Not to my son, who had his whole life ahead of him. A nurse gently told me that Amanda was in the waiting area. When I walked out, I expected to find her devastated, perhaps even hysterical with grief. Instead, she was sitting calmly talking on her phone. "I'll need to check the policy details," she was saying. "Yes, both life insurance and the investments. I need to know exactly what I'm entitled to." She hung up when she saw me quickly, wiping away tears that hadn't been there seconds before. She stood and embraced me, but it felt mechanical, lacking the genuine anguish I was drowning in. Her first question after the obligatory hug was, "Did they tell you anything about his personal effects, his wallet and phone?" The next few days passed in a blur of pain and administrative tasks that seemed impossibly trivial in the face of such loss. Amanda immediately took charge of the funeral arrangements, which initially I was grateful for, as I could barely function through my grief. But as the plans took shape, I became increasingly concerned. She was pushing for a quick, minimalist service, cremation rather than burial, despite Jackson's wishes that had once shared with me to be buried beside his father. A small private gathering rather than a proper funeral where all who loved him could attend. When I suggested we use the funeral home that had handled Robert's service years ago, Amanda dismissed it as unnecessary. "Why waste money on an elaborate service?" she said, her voice cool and practical. Jackson was always sensible about finances. He wouldn't want us to be extravagant. I felt a flare of anger at her presumption. "My son would want to be honored properly," I insisted. "The cost isn't the issue here." Our disagreement escalated until my closest friend Beatrice intervened. She had arrived at my apartment to find me in tears after a particularly difficult phone call with Amanda. After listening to the situation, Beatrice made a suggestion that would prove crucial in the days to come. "Let her handle the service her way," Beatrice advised gently. "But let's document everything. Keep all receipts. Record your conversations if you can. Something doesn't feel right about her behavior." Beatrice helped me navigate the next difficult days. My 3 oldest friends rallied around me, creating a protective circle that got me through the funeral preparations. They took turns staying with me, making sure I ate and slept and accompanying me to the meetings with Amanda and the funeral director. The service itself was held at a modern, minimalist venue that felt nothing like the warm, traditional ceremony Jackson deserved. Amanda had selected the cheapest options for everything from the casket to the flowers. During the service, I noticed her checking her watch repeatedly as though she had somewhere more important to be. Amanda's family's behavior was equally disturbing. Her mother, a sharp-featured woman with calculating eyes, kept asking people about their connections to Jackson, seemingly cataloging who might be important or influential. Her father spent most of the service outside on his phone. Neither showed any genuine emotion for the loss of their son-in-law. After the service, during the small reception Amanda had reluctantly agreed to, I overheard a conversation that chilled me to my core. I had stepped into a quiet hallway to collect myself when Amanda's voice drifted from around the corner. "Don't worry, Mom," she was saying in a low, confident tone. "The lawyer says he'll get everything. The house, the cars, his investments, everything. The old lady gets nothing unless he specifically put it in writing, and Jackson would never have thought to do that. He was too trusting." Her mother replied, "Just make sure you go through all his papers before anyone else can. Clear out anything that might cause problems." I froze, unable to process what I was hearing. Was this really happening? Was my daughter-in-law actually discussing how to secure her inheritance while my son's body was barely cold? I slipped away before they could discover me, my mind reeling with this new horrible reality. The next day, I received a call from Jackson's lawyer, Michael Donovan. He explained that the official reading of the will was scheduled for the following week, but he wanted to meet with me privately beforehand. His tone was serious, almost cautious, which only added to my growing unease. When I mentioned this call to Amanda, her demeanor changed instantly. Her eyes narrowed, and she demanded to know what the lawyer had said. I kept it vague, simply stating he wanted to review some paperwork with me. Amanda insisted on accompanying me to the meeting, but I firmly declined, saying I needed some time alone to process these legal matters. "Mr. Donovan is Jackson's lawyer, not mine," she said with surprising bitterness. "Anything involving Jackson's estate concerns me as his wife." Nevertheless, I stood my ground, and she eventually backed down, though her displeasure was evident. That night, I received several texts from her asking if I knew anything about Jackson's accounts or if he had ever mentioned any special arrangements. I didn't respond, partly because I genuinely didn't know anything at that point, and partly because Beatrice's warning was ringing in my ears. The day before my scheduled meeting with the lawyer, Amanda called again, her voice honey sweet now. "I was thinking, Coco," she said, using a tone one might use with a child, "maybe I should come with you tomorrow after all. These legal matters can be so confusing for someone your age." Her condescension only strengthened my resolve. "Thank you, Amanda, but I've been handling my own affairs for decades. It'll be fine." As I hung up, I wondered what secrets the lawyer might reveal, and whether my son had indeed foreseen the troubling situation I now found myself in. I spent that night looking at old photo albums tracing Jackson's life from infancy to adulthood, crying over the future that had been stolen from him. And somewhere in the dark hours of that sleepless night, I made a promise to my son that I would protect whatever legacy he had left behind, no matter what it took. The law office of Donovan and Associates was located in a stately building in downtown Chicago. As I sat in the reception area, anxiety gnawed at my stomach. What could be so important that Jackson's lawyer needed to speak with me privately before the official will reading? When Michael Donovan welcomed me into his office, his kind eyes and gentle handshake offered some comfort. In his mid-50s, with salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses, he had the trustworthy appearance of someone who had guided many families through difficult times. "Mrs. Baker," he began, using my maiden name, which I'd returned to after my husband died, "thank you for coming. I know this is an incredibly difficult time for you, but there are matters," Jackson was very specific about that, "I need to discuss with you privately." He opened a folder on his desk and slid a document toward me. "This is separate from Jackson's main will. It's a trust he established 3 years ago, with amendments made as recently as 4 months ago." My hands trembled as I looked at the papers, seeing Jackson's familiar signature at the bottom. "I don't understand," I said. "What is this?" "Your son purchased a property in Oak Park 2 years ago," Mr. Donovan explained. a 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood. He also set aside 2 vehicles, a practical SUV and a sedan, and established a separate bank account with a substantial balance. All of these assets are held in this trust with you as the sole beneficiary. The room seemed to tilt slightly. But why wouldn't he tell me about this? Or Amanda? Mr. Donovan's expression grew solemn. Jackson was explicit about keeping this arrangement confidential, particularly from Amanda. He left a letter explaining his decisions. He handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in Jackson's handwriting. With unsteady fingers, I broke the seal and unfolded the letter inside. Mom**. If you're reading this, then something has happened to me and I'm so sorry for the pain you must be feeling. I hope you know how much I love you, and that everything I've done has been to ensure you're taken care of. Asterisk. I've created this trust to provide for you independently of whatever happens with Amanda. The house is fully paid for, the cars are reliable and low maintenance, and the account contains enough money for you to live comfortably without financial worries. Asterisk. I need to be honest about why I've kept this separate from my main estate. Over the past year, I've become concerned about Amanda's spending habits and her attitude toward money. She's accumulated significant debt that I've had to cover multiple times. Worse, I've discovered she's been less than truthful about her financial activities. Asterisk. I don't want to believe she married me for financial security, but I can no longer ignore the signs. I've tried to address these issues with her, but it's led to arguments where she accuses me of not trusting her. Asterisk. Please don't reveal this inheritance immediately. Give it some time after my passing to see how Amanda behaves. My main will provides generously for her, so she won't be in need. This separate arrangement is my way of making sure you're protected no matter what. Asterisk. All my love. Asterisk. Jackson. Tears blurred my vision as I finished reading. The letter confirmed fears I'd tried to dismiss, and raised new questions about the woman my son had married. Did Jackson suspect that Amanda? I couldn't finish the sentence. Mr. Donovan chose his words carefully. Your son was a financial advisor who understood the importance of protecting assets. He expressed concerns about Mrs. Baker's financial decisions and wanted to ensure you had independence and security. What happens at tomorrow's official will reading? I asked. The main will distributes the remainder of Jackson's estate. Amanda receives the primary residence, his investment portfolio with some conditions and other assets. You are mentioned as receiving a modest bequest, which serves as a cover for this larger private arrangement. I sat in silence processing this information. So, Amanda doesn't know about any of this. The house in Oak Park, the cars, the account. Number. The trust was created with privacy provisions. Unless you choose to disclose it, she has no legal way of knowing these assets exist. I thought about Amanda's behavior since Jackson's death, her focus on his assets, the hushed conversations with her mother, her attempts to control the funeral arrangements. A cold certainty settled in my chest. Jackson had been right to be cautious. I'll honor his wishes, I said finally. I won't mention this trust. Mr. Donovan nodded approvingly. I believe that's wise, at least for now. Here's the address of the property keys to both the house and the vehicles and the banking information. Everything is ready for you whenever you decide to use it. The next day, I arrived at the law office for the official reading of the will. Amanda was already there, dressed impeccably in a designer black dress that seemed more appropriate for a business meeting than a widow in mourning. Her parents flanked her like sentinels. As Mr. Donovan read through the will, I watched Amanda's expression. She maintained a somber face when he described the primary residence and investment accounts that would transfer to her, but I noticed the slight twitch of her lips, a barely suppressed smile of satisfaction. Then came the surprise. The investment portfolio, Mr. Donovan continued, is to be held in trust with monthly distributions to Mrs. Amanda Baker. The principal cannot be accessed for a period of 5 years, except for specific circumstances outlined in the trust document. Amanda's composed facade cracked. What? That's not possible. Jackson would never restrict my access to our money. These were Mr. Baker's explicit instructions, the lawyer replied calmly. He was very specific about the structure of this bequest. When Mr. Donovan mentioned the modest sum Jackson had left me in the main will, Amanda's relief was palpable. She clearly believed this was all I would receive. After the reading, Amanda confronted me in the hallway outside the office. "Did you know about these restrictions?" she demanded, her voice low but intense. "Did you convince him to do this?" I looked into the eyes of this woman who had shared my son's life and saw nothing but cold calculation. "Jackson made his own decisions, Amanda. He was always careful with financial planning." "This isn't right," she hissed. "He wouldn't do this unless someone put ideas in his head." I simply walked away, the weight of Jackson's secret trust like a shield around my heart. Over the next few days, Amanda called repeatedly, her tone alternating between syrupy concern and barely veiled accusations. She suggested we go through Jackson's papers together at their house, ostensibly to organize his affairs, but clearly hoping to discover any additional assets. Meanwhile, I visited the Oak Park house alone. It was a beautiful craftsman-style home, on a tree-lined street, modest but charming, with a welcoming front porch and a small, well-maintained garden. When I unlocked the door and stepped inside, I found a home that was move-in ready, furnished tastefully in a style I loved. In the master bedroom, I discovered a photo of Jackson and me on the nightstand taken during a trip to Lake Michigan years ago. My son was smiling broadly, his arm around my shoulders. Seeing his face so full of life brought a fresh wave of grief. As I explored further, I found the kitchen stocked with new appliances, the linen closet filled with fresh towels and bedding, and the garage containing both vehicles mentioned in the trust, a practical Honda CR-V and a comfortable Toyota Camry, both recent models. In the home office, a filing cabinet contained meticulously organized documents, property taxes paid in advance, vehicle registrations, insurance policies, and maintenance records. Jackson had thought of everything. There was also a folder labeled Amanda that contained disturbing information, credit card statements showing extravagant purchases, loan applications in Jackson's name that he apparently hadn't known about, and records of large cash withdrawals from their joint accounts with no explanation of where the money had gone. I told Amanda I was moving out of my apartment to stay with an old friend who had offered me a place to live while I grieved. It wasn't entirely a lie. This house was indeed a gift from someone who loved me deeply. I began quietly moving my belongings to my new home, careful not to raise suspicions about where I was actually living. As I settled into the house Jackson had prepared for me, I felt both profound gratitude for my son's foresight and deep sadness that he had felt compelled to create this secret arrangement. What kind of marriage had he truly been living in? And what would Amanda do when she realized the full extent of the restrictions Jackson had placed on his assets? I would find out sooner than I expected, and in ways that would shake me to my core. The first few weeks in my new home were a strange mixture of grief and discovery. Each morning, I woke to the reality that Jackson was gone, the pain as fresh as the day I received that terrible phone call. Yet each day also brought small revelations about the thoughtfulness my son had put into preparing this sanctuary for me. The kitchen contained my favorite brand of coffee, and the tea I preferred in the evenings. The bookshelves held not only my favorite authors, but also new releases from writers I enjoyed. In the closet of the second bedroom, I found a sewing machine identical to the one I had mentioned wanting to replace. Every discovery was like a message from Jackson, reminding me how well he had known and loved me. Amanda maintained contact through frequent phone calls and text messages, always inquiring about my well-being in a voice that rang false to my ears. Her questions inevitably turned to finances. Had I found any important papers among my things? Had Jackson ever mentioned other accounts or investments to me? Did I know if he kept a safe deposit box? About 2 weeks after I moved, Amanda asked if she could visit me at my new place. My instinct was to refuse, but I realized that would only increase her suspicion. Instead, I suggested meeting at a cafe near my old apartment building, claiming my friend's home was being renovated and wasn't suitable for visitors. When we met, Amanda arrived dressed impeccably in designer clothes that must have cost thousands, with a new diamond tennis bracelet glinting on her wrist. For someone in mourning, she appeared remarkably put together and focused. "You look well, Coco," she said, her eyes scanning me as if searching for signs of deceit. "This friend you're staying with must be taking good care of you." "She's been very kind," I replied simply. Amanda leaned forward, her voice dropping to a confidential whisper. "I've been thinking about your situation. It's not right that Jackson left you with so little. I want to help you perhaps set up a monthly allowance from my inheritance." The condescension in her tone made my skin crawl, but I maintained a neutral expression. "That's very kind, but unnecessary. I have my Social Security and some savings. I'll be fine." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Still, I'd feel better knowing you're secure. Jackson would want me to look after you. Perhaps I could come see where you're staying, make sure it's adequate." "Thank you, but I'm quite comfortable," I insisted. "How are you managing in the house? It must feel empty without Jackson." A flash of something annoyance, impatience, crossed her face before she composed herself. "It's difficult, of course. So many memories." She dabbed at dry eyes with a tissue. "I'm thinking of redecorating, actually. A fresh start." 3 days after our cafe meeting, I returned home from grocery shopping to find Amanda's luxury SUV parked on my street several houses down. My heart raced as I pulled into my garage, quickly closing the door behind me. Had she followed me? How had she found my address? I peered through the blinds and watched as she walked slowly past the house, studying it intently, before returning to her vehicle and driving away. The next day, I installed a security system with cameras covering all entrances. A week later, the system proved its worth when an alert on my phone showed Amanda at my front door while I was out having lunch with Beatrice. I watched in real time as she tried the doorknob, then moved to peer through windows. Finding everything locked, she left a gift bag on the porch and departed. When I returned home, I approached the bag cautiously. Inside was a scented candle with a card reading, "Thinking of you in your time of grief. Would love to catch up soon. Love, Amanda." I examined the candle carefully before setting it aside, uncomfortable with the invasion of my space. Beatrice suggested I take the candle to her son, who worked in security. His examination revealed a small listening device embedded in the wax. "Someone wanted to hear what's happening in your home," he explained, showing me the tiny microphone. The discovery sent chills down my spine. I began to wonder what else Amanda might be capable of, and whether Jackson had known the full extent of her deception. My concerns deepened when I received official-looking documents in the mail that Amanda had asked me to sign to help settle Jackson's estate matters. Fortunately, I showed them to Mr. Donovan before signing anything. He was alarmed by what he saw. "These documents would effectively waive your rights to contest any aspect of Jackson's will or the distribution of assets not explicitly covered in the will," he explained. "Had you signed these, you could have potentially lost your rights to the trust Jackson established for you." "Why would she send these if she doesn't know about the trust?" I asked, confused. "It's likely a fishing expedition," Mr. Donovan suggested. "She suspects there might be more to Jackson's estate than what was revealed in the main will reading. These documents are worded broadly enough to cover any assets that might surface later." Around this time, I began hearing troubling reports from mutual friends. Amanda had been telling people I was not coping well with Jackson's death, that I was confused and making up stories about Jackson's intentions. She suggested my grief had affected my mental stability. Nancy, who had been my friend since Jackson was in elementary school, called me in distress after encountering Amanda at a community function. "She's telling everyone you're slipping mentally, Coco," said you've been accusing her of terrible things and that she's worried about you living alone. "Is everything okay?" I assured Nancy I was perfectly sound of mind, but the damage was being done. Several acquaintances began treating me with the careful deference one shows to someone who might be mentally fragile. Invitations to social events dwindled as Amanda systematically worked to isolate me from our shared social circle. Then came perhaps the most shocking revelation. Thomas, who had been Jackson's best friend since college, asked to meet me privately. Over coffee in my kitchen, his expression grave, he shared information that confirmed my worst suspicions. Jackson came to me about 8 months before the accident, Thomas began hesitantly. He was troubled about Amanda's spending and some inconsistencies in their finances. He had discovered credit cards he knew nothing about, loans taken out in his name, and large unexplained withdrawals from their accounts. Thomas looked down at his coffee cup. He asked me to keep an eye on things if anything ever happened to him, to make sure you were protected. He paused, then added reluctantly, he also mentioned that he thought Amanda might be seeing someone else. He didn't have proof, but he had suspicions. The betrayal I felt on behalf of my son was overwhelming. Did he confront her? I asked. He tried to address the financial issues, Thomas replied. But whenever he brought it up, she would either turn it around on him, accusing him of not trusting her, or break down crying until he backed off. Classic manipulation tactics. Thomas hesitated before continuing. There's something else you should know. 3 weeks ago, I saw Amanda having dinner with a man at an expensive restaurant downtown. They looked intimate. When I asked her about it later, she claimed he was a financial advisor helping her with Jackson's estate. But the way he was holding her hand didn't look professional to me. The revelation that Amanda might have been unfaithful to Jackson, even before his death, possibly even dating someone new, mere months after his funeral, was a new wound on my already broken heart. I began to wonder just how much my son had suffered in his marriage, and how much he had shielded me from. My suspicions about Amanda's true character were growing by the day. What had started as odd behavior at the funeral had escalated into what appeared to be a systematic campaign to control Jackson's assets and undermine my credibility. I resolved to document everything, every interaction, every strange occurrence, every piece of evidence that might reveal her true intentions. Little did I know that Amanda was about to make a move so bold, so unconscionable, that it would force me to finally take action to protect not just my son's legacy but my very autonomy. 1 week after my conversation with Thomas, I received a certified letter that would change everything. It arrived on a Tuesday morning, requiring my signature for delivery. The return address belonged to a law firm I didn't recognize, not Michael Donovan's office. My hands trembled slightly as I opened the envelope, some sixth sense warning me that its contents would be significant. Inside was a legal document with a heading that made my blood run cold. Petition for appointment of conservator. As I read further, disbelief gave way to horror. Amanda was petitioning the court to declare me mentally incompetent and to appoint herself as conservator over my person and estate. The petition contained outrageous claims that I was suffering from deteriorating cognitive abilities and paranoid delusions following Jackson's death, that I had become increasingly confused about financial matters and was unable to properly care for myself, that I had made unfounded accusations against family members and was at risk of being financially exploited by unscrupulous individuals. Most disturbing were the supporting documents, a letter from a psychiatrist I had never met, who claimed to have observed signs of dementia during a family gathering, and statements from 2 of Amanda's friends attesting to my confused state and irrational behavior. The document stated that a hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later, where a judge would consider the petition and potentially grant Amanda full control over my finances, medical decisions, and living arrangements. My hands shaking with both fear and fury, I immediately called Michael Donovan's office. His secretary, hearing the panic in my voice, put me through right away. "Mr. Donovan, Amanda is trying to have me declared incompetent," I said as soon as he answered. "She's filed for conservatorship." There was a moment of stunned silence before he replied, "Mrs. Baker, please bring that paperwork to my office immediately. Do not contact Amanda or anyone else about this. We need to respond strategically." An hour later, I sat across from Michael Donovan as he reviewed the petition, his expression growing increasingly troubled. "This is a serious matter," he said, finally looking up at me, "but also a desperate move that suggests Amanda may suspect the existence of hidden assets. Can she do this?" I asked, my voice smaller than I intended. "Declare me incompetent when there's nothing wrong with me." "Not if we fight it properly," he assured me. "But we need to understand what we're dealing with. This isn't just about money anymore. Amanda is attempting to take control of your very autonomy." At Mr. Donovan's recommendation, I hired a private investigator to look into Amanda's activities. The results were disturbing. The PI discovered that Amanda had indeed hired her own investigator to follow me, which explained how she had found my new address. More alarmingly, she had been accessing my medical records illegally through a friend who worked at my doctor's office, looking for anything she could use to support her claims about my mental state. The investigation also revealed that the psychiatrist who had provided the letter for Amanda's petition had never actually met me. He was a colleague of Amanda's cousin and had written the assessment based solely on her descriptions of my supposed behavior. Perhaps most disturbing was the discovery that Amanda had already consulted with real estate agents about selling both Jackson's primary residence and my new home, which she had somehow connected to Jackson despite the trust's privacy provisions. Armed with this information, Mr. Donovan helped me prepare a response to the petition. We gathered statements from my regular physician confirming my excellent mental health testimonials from longtime friends about my lucidity and independence, and financial records demonstrating my capability in managing my affairs. While this legal battle was brewing behind the scenes, Amanda made her most brazen move yet. She appeared at my door one afternoon, all sympathetic smiles and concerned eyes, with a woman she introduced as a friend who helps elderly people with their daily needs. "I've been so worried about you, Coco," Amanda said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "I know you say you're fine, but living alone at your age, especially after such a traumatic loss, I just want to make sure you have proper support." The friend turned out to be a geriatric case manager who began asking invasive questions about my daily routine medications and ability to perform basic tasks. It became clear this was an attempt to conduct an informal capacity assessment that could be used in court. I maintained my composure, answering questions clearly and demonstrating my complete mental acuity, but inside I was seething at the manipulation. When they finally left, Amanda paused at the door and said something that chilled me to the bone. "Don't worry about anything, Coco. Soon I'll take care of everything for you. All your concerns will be over." The threat beneath her saccharine words was unmistakable. In that moment, looking into her cold eyes, barely concealing their calculation, I knew with absolute certainty that Amanda had never truly loved Jackson. She had seen him as a means to financial security, nothing more. That night, I couldn't sleep, haunted by the thought of Amanda controlling every aspect of my life: where I lived, what medical care I received, how I spent my days, and most importantly, the resources Jackson had worked so hard to provide. For me, the idea that she might succeed in this scheme was unbearable. My despair turned to resolve by morning. I would not allow this woman to take advantage of me the way she had taken advantage of my son. Jackson had tried to protect me through his careful estate planning. Now it was my turn to protect his legacy and my independence. The next day brought another shocking discovery. While organizing Jackson's papers that I had brought with me from my old apartment, I found a USB drive labeled simply "Insurance." Curious, I plugged it into my computer. The drive contained dozens of files, emails between Jackson and Amanda, that he had saved photographs of credit card statements with her extravagant purchases, highlighted recordings of phone conversations where she demanded more money for the catered, various expenses, and most damning of all, a video. The video showed Amanda in an intimate embrace with a man in the parking lot of an upscale hotel. The timestamp indicated it was taken just 2 months before Jackson's death. My son had known about her infidelity and had documented it, perhaps in preparation for a divorce that he never had the chance to initiate. There was also a draft of a letter to a divorce attorney outlining his concerns about Amanda's spending her dishonesty and the evidence he had gathered of her affair. He had never sent it according to the metadata. The letter was dated just 1 week before his fatal accident. The weight of this knowledge that Jackson had been preparing to leave Amanda, that he had been unhappy and deceived in his marriage, brought a fresh wave of grief. Had he died believing his marriage was a failure? Had he felt trapped by Amanda's manipulation? These were questions I would never be able to ask him. But the evidence he had gathered would now serve a different purpose. It would help me fight the woman who sought to control me just as she had controlled him. With trembling hands, I copied all the files and brought the USB drive to Mr. Donovan the next morning. As the court date approached, Amanda's behavior became increasingly erratic. She began telling mutual friends that I had hidden assets belonging to Jackson, that I was stealing her inheritance, and that I was mentally unstable and vindictive. She even went so far as to suggest to some that I might have influenced Jackson against her before his death. The night before the hearing, I sat alone in the house. My son had lovingly prepared for me, surrounded by the evidence of his care and foresight. I looked at our photographs, read again the letter he had left with Mr. Donovan, and made a promise to the memory of my beloved child. "I won't let her win, Jackson," I whispered into the quiet room. "I won't let her take what you built or destroy your legacy, and I won't let her take my freedom." Tomorrow would bring the confrontation I had been dreading, but also the opportunity to finally expose Amanda's true nature and intentions. As I prepared for battle, I felt Jackson's presence around me, strengthening my resolve. I would need every ounce of that strength to face what was coming. The morning of the court hearing dawned clear and cold. I dressed carefully in a conservative navy blue suit that Jackson had given me for my birthday 2 years earlier, wanting to project an image of composure and mental clarity. Beatrice arrived to drive me to the courthouse, her presence, a comforting reminder that I wasn't facing this battle alone. "You look strong, Coco," she said, giving my hand a reassuring squeeze. "Amanda has no idea what she's up against." Michael Donovan met us at the courthouse steps, his briefcase bulging with the evidence we had gathered. "Remember what we discussed," he advised quietly as we walked in. "Answer questions directly and calmly. Don't let Amanda or her attorney provoke an emotional response. The judge needs to see you as completely competent and in control." The courtroom was smaller than I had imagined, with polished wooden benches and the solemn atmosphere of a place where life-altering decisions were made daily. Amanda was already seated with her attorney, a sharp-featured woman in an expensive suit. Amanda had dressed for the role of concerned daughter-in-law, in a modest black dress, her hair pulled back in a simple style, all traces of her usual flashy appearance carefully subdued. When our eyes met, she gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. A smile that seemed to say she believed victory was already hers. That smile strengthened my determination. The hearing began with Amanda's attorney presenting her petition, painting a picture of me as a grief-stricken elderly woman whose mental faculties had deteriorated to the point where I couldn't manage my own affairs. She described incidents mostly fabricated or grossly exaggerated of my supposed confusion, paranoia, and financial mismanagement. "Mrs. Baker Sr. has become increasingly paranoid, accusing my client of terrible things without basis," the attorney stated. "She has isolated herself, moving to a new residence without telling family where she was going. She has rejected Mrs. Amanda Baker's attempts to help her, showing poor judgment that puts her at risk." The attorney called Amanda to testify, and she played her part perfectly, the concerned, long-suffering daughter-in-law who only wanted what was best for her husband's elderly mother. "I promised Jackson I would take care of his mother," Amanda said, her voice catching in a well-practiced display of emotion. "But since his death, she's changed. She forgets conversations we've had. She makes wild accusations. She's moved to a new place without telling me where. I'm terrified she'll fall victim to scammers or make decisions that leave her destitute. I'm only doing what Jackson would have wanted, protecting his mother, when she can no longer protect herself." When it was our turn, Michael Donovan approached the matter methodically. First, he called my regular physician, Dr. Eleanor Walsh, who testified that my recent physical and cognitive assessments showed no signs of impairment. "Mrs. Baker is in excellent health. For a woman of 67, Dr. Walsh stated firmly. "Her cognitive function is completely normal. In my professional opinion, there is absolutely no medical basis for the concerns raised in this petition." Next came affidavits from friends who had known me for decades, all attesting to my mental acuity and independence. Thomas provided particularly powerful testimony about Jackson's concerns regarding Amanda's financial behavior before his death. Then Mr. Donovan called me to the stand. Under his careful questioning, I spoke clearly about my life, my relationship with Jackson, and the events following his death. I explained my decision to move without telling Amanda my exact location, citing her increasingly intrusive behavior. "I became concerned when I found a listening device in a gift Amanda had left on my porch," I stated as, Mr. Donovan presented the device as evidence. I also received documents from her that my attorney identified as an attempt to waive my rights to any assets not explicitly mentioned in Jackson's will. Amanda's face tightened as I spoke, her confident demeanor beginning to crack. Her attorney objected repeatedly, but the judge allowed my testimony to continue. Then came the moment we had prepared for. Mr. Donovan asked Mrs. Baker, "Did you commission a private investigation regarding the petitioner's activities?" "Yes," I replied. After receiving the conservatorship petition, I was advised to understand exactly what I was facing. Mr. Donovan introduced the investigator's report into evidence, including photographs of Amanda with her boyfriend, at times when she claimed to be grieving documentation of her attempts to access my medical records illegally, and evidence that she had been planning to sell properties she didn't legally control. The courtroom grew tense as this evidence was presented. Amanda whispered frantically to her attorney, her composed facade completely gone now. But the most damning evidence was still to come. Mr. Donovan introduced the USB drive Jackson had left, containing his documentation of Amanda's affair and financial misdeeds. Your Honor, Mr. Donovan said this evidence demonstrates that the petitioner's concerns about Mrs. Baker's mental state are not only unfounded, but appear to be part of a pattern of behavior aimed at controlling assets. Jackson Baker himself was documenting his wife's concerning behavior before his untimely death. Amanda shot to her feet. He had no right to spy on me. Those files are private. Mrs. Baker, please control yourself, the judge admonished, looking increasingly troubled by what was unfolding in his courtroom. When all our evidence had been presented, Mr. Donovan delivered his final argument. Your Honor, this petition is not about protecting an elderly woman from her own declining faculties. It is about a young widow attempting to gain control over assets she believes her mother-in-law might possess. There is absolutely no evidence of cognitive impairment, but substantial evidence of the petitioner's concerning motives. The judge considered for only a brief time before rendering his decision. Based on the evidence presented, I find no basis for the appointment of a conservator. Mrs. Coco Baker appears fully capable of managing her own affairs. He turned a stern gaze toward Amanda. Furthermore, I am troubled by evidence suggesting this petition may have been brought in bad faith. The petition is denied. Relief washed over me like a physical wave. I had won. My autonomy was secure. As we prepared to leave the courtroom, I made a decision. It was time to end the secrecy Jackson had requested now that Amanda had shown her true colors so completely. I approached her in the hallway, outside the courtroom where she stood with her attorney still reeling from their defeat. Amanda, I said calmly, there's something you should know. Jackson didn't just leave me the small bequest mentioned in his main will. He established a separate trust for me with a house, 2 cars, and a substantial bank account, all legally mine and completely beyond your reach. The shock on her face was almost worth all the stress of the past weeks. Her mouth opened and closed without sound like a fish suddenly finding itself on dry land. He knew Amanda. He knew about the credit cards, the loans, the affair. He was planning to divorce you. The accident happened before he could file the papers. Color drained from her face. You're lying, she whispered. But there was no conviction in her voice. The house you've been trying to find. The one you planned to force me to sell once you had control of my affairs. Jackson bought it for me 2 years ago. Everything is documented, legal, and protected. You've lost, Amanda. Not just today, but everything. I turned to walk away, then paused and looked back at her. One more thing. Stay away from me and anything that belonged to my son. If you come near me or my property again, I'll file for a restraining order and pursue charges for the illegal surveillance and accessing of my medical records. I believe the judge would look favorably on such a request given what he heard today. With that, I walked away, my head high, feeling stronger than I had since receiving that terrible phone call about Jackson's accident. For the first time since his death, I felt like I had truly honored his memory and protected the legacy he had worked so hard to build. Amanda never contested the judge's ruling. Within weeks, I heard through mutual friends that she had sold the primary residence Jackson had left her and moved to another state. The financial restrictions Jackson had placed on his investment portfolio remained in place, limiting her access to the funds, a final act of foresight from my remarkable son. As for me, I settled into the lovely home Jackson had prepared, surrounded by reminders of his love and care. The victory over Amanda hadn't diminished my grief. Nothing could do that, but it had given me a sense of justice, of wrongs righted, that helped me begin the long journey toward healing. The months following the court hearing were a time of gradual healing. Grief, I discovered, doesn't follow a straight line. Some days I could smile at memories of Jackson, feeling grateful for the 36 years I had been blessed to be his mother. Other days, the pain of his absence felt as fresh as the moment I had first learned of his death. The house in Oak Park became my sanctuary. I spent the first spring planting a garden in the backyard, something I had never had space for in my apartment. I chose plants Jackson had always admired on our walks together: dogwoods, hydrangeas, and the black-eyed Susans he had loved since childhood. Working with my hands in the soil brought a peace I hadn't expected, as if each plant was a small tribute to his memory. As I settled into my new life, I made a decision about part of the money Jackson had left me. With Mr. Donovan's help, I established a small foundation in Jackson's name dedicated to providing financial education and assistance to single parents struggling to put their children through college. It felt right to honor Jackson's memory by helping others in situations similar to what we had faced together. The foundation work gave structure to my days and connected me with people who shared my values. Each scholarship we awarded reminded me of Jackson's generosity and his belief that education could transform lives, just as it had transformed his. Gradually, friends who had been misled by Amanda's lies reached out to reconnect. Many were embarrassed that they had believed her claims about my mental state, but I chose not to hold grudges. Life was too short, and I had learned the hard way how precious true friendships were. Nancy, who had known me since Jackson was in elementary school, brought me a potted plant and tears of apology. "I'm so sorry I doubted you, Coco," she said. "Amanda was so convincing, and grief does strange things to people. I should have known better." I hugged her tightly. "We all want to believe the best of people," I told her. "That's not a character flaw. It's a gift. Just be a little more careful about who you give that gift to." About 6 months after the court hearing, I received an unexpected letter with a Florida postmark. The handwriting on the envelope was Amanda's. I stared at it for a long time before finding the courage to open it. Inside was a 3-page letter. Amanda wrote that she had moved to Miami and was trying to start over. She admitted to marrying Jackson partly for financial security, though she claimed she had grown to care for him in her own way. She apologized for her actions after his death, blaming them on panic and fear about her future. The letter ended with a request for forgiveness and an invitation to call or write if I ever felt ready to rebuild some kind of relationship. She included her new address and phone number. I read the letter several times, searching for sincerity between the carefully crafted lines. Was this a genuine attempt at amends or another manipulation? In the end, I decided it didn't matter. I had no obligation to respond or to welcome Amanda back into my life. Some bridges once burned should remain crossed. I filed the letter away without replying. Perhaps someday I would feel differently, but for now, maintaining firm boundaries felt like the healthiest choice for my well-being. As the 1-year anniversary of Jackson's death approached, I found myself drawn to helping others who might face situations similar to mine. Through a local senior center, I began volunteering with a program that educated elderly people about financial abuse and exploitation. My personal experience gave weight to my warnings about the signs of potential financial manipulation, especially from family members. These volunteering sessions introduced me to a community of resilient, vibrant seniors who had survived their own losses and challenges. Among them was Arthur, a retired English professor whose wife had died 3 years earlier. He had the same gentle humor Jackson had possessed and a kindness that put everyone at ease. Arthur and I began having coffee after the senior center sessions, sharing stories of our children and grandchildren. He had 3 of each. Our former careers, he had taught literature for 40 years, and gradually our experiences of grief and recovery. We were just friends, I would tell Beatrice when she raised her eyebrows suggestively. But his companionship added a warmth to my life that I hadn't expected to find again. We attended concerts at the park, discussed books from the library, and sometimes just sat in comfortable silence, understanding that some feelings didn't need words. On the anniversary of Jackson's death, Arthur accompanied me to the cemetery. He stood respectfully at a distance while I placed flowers on my son's grave and spoke softly to the marble headstone, telling Jackson about the foundation, the garden, and how much he was still loved and missed. Afterward, Arthur and I walked slowly back to the car. "You raised a remarkable son," he said quietly. "The way he protected you even after he was gone, that speaks volumes about the man he was and the mother who raised him." Tears filled my eyes, but they weren't only tears of sadness. Jackson had indeed been remarkable, and though his life had been cut tragically short, the impact of his love continued to shape my days. That evening, sitting on my porch with a cup of tea, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, I reflected on the painful but necessary lessons of the past year. I had learned that sometimes people wear masks so convincing that even those closest to them can't see their true faces. I'd learned that grief can make you vulnerable, but it can also reveal strengths you never knew you possessed. I'd discovered that it's possible to protect yourself without hardening your heart against all connection. Most importantly, I'd learned that even in death, love continues. Jackson had demonstrated that truth through his careful planning, his determination to protect me, even when he no longer walked this earth. That love had given me not just material security, but the courage to stand up for myself when threatened. I would always miss my son. The ache of his absence would never completely disappear. But I had found a way forward, a path through grief, toward a life still worth living, still capable of joy and meaning. And I knew with the deep certainty of a mother's heart that this is exactly what Jackson would have wanted for me. Life continues to surprise me even at 67. I never expected to face such betrayal. Never imagined I would need to fight for my autonomy in a courtroom. Never thought I would build a new life from the ashes of such profound loss. Yet here I am, grateful for each new day and the opportunities it brings. If you are watching this and facing your own journey through grief or betrayal, please know that you are stronger than you realize. Honor those you have lost by living with integrity and purpose. Protect yourself from those who would take advantage of your vulnerability, but don't close your heart to new connections. Find ways to transform your pain into something meaningful, something that helps others navigate their own difficult paths. And please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to this channel, and share your own stories in the comments. Have you ever had to protect yourself from someone you once trusted? What helped you find your way through grief toward healing? Your experiences might be exactly what another viewer needs to hear today. Thank you for listening to my story. May you find peace on your journey, wisdom in your challenges, and people worthy of your trust to walk beside you along the way.